Excellent. Okay. So let's get started. So obviously the idea of this talk, we wanted to deliver this because we've been working for the last maybe 6, 7 months on a jungle expedition, and we actually thought not a lot of people know about what it's like to be in jungle environments, but you often see them in films, you've seen them in books. There's some really fascinating books about it, and I thought it'd be a really good opportunity for us just to go through some of the basics of survival, and understand what the jungle's like and actually what the environment's like. And if you do ever find yourself going on an adventure travel trip or going on a trip on your own into the jungle, understanding some of the basics that are going to help you, number one, enjoy it, and also I suppose the biggest important thing is also surviving. So let's get started. I suppose we're going to break it down a number of different things. I think the first thing is just understanding what the jungle is and also the types of jungle. Then we're going to look at the clothing that you need to wear in the jungle. Clothing is actually one of the biggest mistakes that people make going into the jungle, as well as equipment, is bringing some of the too much equipment and lots of the wrong stuff into the jungle with them. We'll look at first aid, so a very basic overview of some of the things that you have to consider slightly differently in the jungle when it comes to first aid, and when you're out there, if you have anything to happen to you, how you're going to try and fix some of those problems. A few survival tips, and they're going to kind of be intertwined throughout as we go through. Navigation in the jungle, and especially navigation for safety. Some of the wildlife, we'll look at some of the considerations with wildlife. I think when people hear jungle, they worry about the wildlife, and I want to try and change that viewpoint and understand actually it's not too bad at all. Equipment that you need to take in, traveling through the jungle, often usually on foot, but also on boat. Rescues. So if you find yourself stuck in the jungle on your own, which is probably one of the hardest things to do, is how can you get rescued? And obviously, if you want to stay at the very end of that, just for a few minutes at the end, I'll talk you through our jungle expedition out in Borneo, and why we designed it and what we're going to be covering. So, first things first, jungle environments, unless they're man-made, are within the tropic belt, which is just along the equator, basically. You can see the Tropic of Cancer up in the north and the Tropic of Capricorn here. These are the regions you're going to find jungles. So the main jungle areas we all know: South America, the Amazon. You've got the Congo and surrounding areas of the Congo in Africa, and then in Southeast Asia, you've got Papua New Guinea. You've obviously got Borneo, which is this big island just here. The reason they're the only areas that you have jungle environments are because of the conditions that being on the equator creates. So the first thing to think about is the heat. So the closer to the equator you are, the hotter it's going to be. And also the closer to the equator you are, the more rain you're going to be getting, which often then the heat and the rain creates humidity, which is one of the best opportunities for plant life to grow, which creates those environments. So that's why you find jungles in those regions. It's very, very important, which we're going to talk about later on as well, is when you do go to jungles, knowing whether you're in slightly in the northern hemisphere or slightly in the southern hemisphere, because actually when it comes to navigating and understanding some of those things, your considerations will change. So going to the jungle, as you can see, it's vast, it's dense, and it's very, very difficult. I would actually say the jungle is the most difficult scenario, like area to go to in a survival basis. For group trekking, it's incredible, but if you find yourself alone in the jungle, it's very, very, very difficult because it's very difficult for navigation, for safety, for first aid, for food, for fluid, all those things that we're going to talk about today. So first things first, types of jungle. There are actually two main types of jungle that we're going to consider today, and the first one is the primary jungle. The primary jungle. This is a video just here on the left, and you can have a quick look. This is a video from Borneo, actually, the last one that I led out in Borneo. So the primary jungle means untouched jungle. Basically, it means it has never been chopped down, it's never been influenced by any climatic factors. It's never had any kind of man-made problems done to it, whether it be deforestation. So what it means it is a proper jungle. It's untouched. In Borneo, as an example, in these regions, these jungles are some of the oldest in the world, and you can tell a primary jungle quite quickly for a number of different reasons. The first thing usually is the canopy height. So when we say canopy, we're talking about the top of the trees. The canopy height is extremely high because the trees have been competing for thousands of years to get higher, to get more light. And what you do then tend to find is at the bottom of the jungle, in a primary jungle, is actually pretty sparse. There isn't much, and it's easy enough to walk through and cover ground. And that's because the lack of light means that a lot of plants that are lower down don't survive. Often you can find with primary jungles, there's more than one canopy as well, which can be often quite confusing when you go into really dense areas of the jungle. So as an example here, it's actually because the clouds are in here because we're on a what you call a montane jungle, a higher jungle higher up in the air. And so the clouds are sticking to the trees, but here you can have one canopy, and then another 10 meters above you can have another one. So you actually don't know the depth of the jungle that you're in. On the right here, this one just here, this is called a secondary jungle, and secondary jungle is one that has been affected by either climatic changes or man-made deforestation, and the demographic of the area. You also tend to find these on the edges of the tropic belt. So these areas you can tell a secondary jungle for two reasons. Number one, it has usually a lack of wildlife, so there's a lot less wildlife in those secondary jungles. But also on the ground, there's a lot more overgrown. There's a lot more thorns. It's a lot harder to walk through and trek through, and that is because the sunlight has had the opportunity to get through the canopy and get down to the ground. And obviously, then plant life at the bottom of the ground has grown astronomically and gone and kind of covered the whole area. The one in the middle, if you find yourself here, it's not a great place to be. This is a mangrove swamp. So this is coastal jungle. So this is right on the edge of the coastline. If I don't know how you'd find yourself lost in here or stuck in here, but if you do, it is not a great place to be. It's very, very hard to move around. And obviously there is no dry ground whatsoever. So you have if we're going straight into survival tips, you have two choices here. If you're right near the coast and you think there's an opportunity for rescue, then definitely try and hang on the edge of the mangrove swamps. But realistically, you only want to be there for 24 hours. You can't really be there much longer. If you're going to be there for longer and you think there's a lack of opportunity for rescue, you need to climb across those mangroves and swim and get through the swamps. And you might have to go for quite a long time until eventually you get to some more dense jungle and find some dry ground for you to be able to set up camp and things that we're going to talk about. So clothing, as I said earlier, clothing equipment is the most important part of when you come to planning to go to the jungle. I've got this picture here. This is from the last time we were out in the jungle. I'm just going to talk you through some of the gear that you can see here because this is kind of the normal stuff that you would want to wear when you're out in the jungle. So first things first, you want to try and cover as much skin as possible. The reason being is number one, it's going to stop any kind of or minimize any bites, mosquito bites. It's also going to try and minimize any opportunity for you to get cut when you're going to get caught on thorns and things like that. You really do want to minimize getting cut. The other thing when you come to wear these clothes, you want to have them pretty loose fitting, and you also want to have the opportunity to be able to tie your cuffs up and tie your neck up. That is because if you do find yourself having to bushwhack, which is cutting through any kind of jungle, dense jungle, often bugs and things might be dropping off. And if you've got your skin covered, it's going to stop it from, or your neck and wrist covered, it's going to stop it from getting inside your shirt. The sweat wicking thing is so important in the jungle. It obviously gets very, very humid in the daytime, so you sweat a lot. So the opportunity for a shirt to be able to dry out very quickly and also sweat wick is really, really important. And then when it comes to trousers, you want to cover up your skin as much as possible also. You see that we've got a brimmed hat here. Brimmed hats are really, really good. Obviously, you have to consider sun cover, but it's not too much of an issue in the jungle. But with brimmed hat, what they do is any debris, i.e., like anything that falls off trees, any bugs, anything like that, they don't tend to fall on top of you. They'll hit the hat and come off. So brimmed hat can be really, really good to have as well. And then you can see a few number of different things with this kit. So I've got my watch on my belt there rather than on my wrist. Reason being is when it's really, really sweaty, your watch can get quite irritable on your wrists. So moving on to a belt loop can be really, really handy just to stop any sores. And then you can see here down at the bottom here, I've got these weird looking socks, and these are called leech socks. We're going to go into talk about leeches shortly, but what leech socks do is they stop leeches going inside your boot and get into your feet, which is where most of them go. And I will move on to leeches later on in the chat and go in a little bit more depth. And then I suppose if there's anything else to consider for us that we carry as guides, you've got like a GPS tracker here. So at all times in the jungle, we're releasing our location live, so people can always find where we are. And then you've also got just in this area, just here, and also you see who's got one just there as well. What these are, this is navigational tools. So anyone that was in the military will probably know this as well. In the jungle, navigation is incredibly hard because there's not many features for you to navigate off. So sometimes you have to count steps and just follow a bearing and just know what direction you're walking in. So these beads, basically, I know as an example, a bit of a sado, every 52 two steps I do, so I count them every 2 steps. 52 of them is 100 meters. So I know I can move one, and I know I've got 10 on there. Once I've done 10, I've covered a kilometer. So it's a really good way of navigating through. And I suppose finally it's boots, which you can see just here. Um, there's lots of brands now bringing out specialist jungle boots, which are like very plasticky, and they have loads of gaps in there for water run through. I don't think there's any need to have two specialist boot for the jungle, especially if you're going there for a short holiday. If you're living in the jungle and spending a long time there, definitely have a more specialized boot. But I use the same
Jack,
kind of
sorry.
boots. Yes, no worries.
Jack, sorry, mate. You're breaking up quite a lot. I'm not sure if it's for everyone else, but I'm struggling to hear you at the moment.
Oh, okay, no worries at all. Thanks, mate. I'll what I might do is
That's
turn
better
my
now.
camera off.
Also,
Just
can't see
say,
your pointer.
okay, no worries at all. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, so just going back onto talking about the boots. With boots, you kind of want to try and have boots that are going to be able to dry out relatively quickly. So you don't want really warm, thick boots. You want them to be relatively thin, definitely have some ankle cover, and ones that you think in the evenings you're going to be dry out, and not so much dry out if you're going to be walking through swamps, but definitely drying out if you're going to be basically setting up camp each evening. You would have sweaty feet all day. You can put them by the fire and they're going to start to dry out a little bit. The other caveat to that is if you don't want to be buying a new pair of boots to go into the jungle, the other opportunity is also to have some waterproof socks. Waterproof socks are a godsend. Number one, they're going to help you keep your feet dry. The downside is they can make them more sweaty because they get warmer. But what they're very, very good at is drying your boots out. So if you put them on when you're in wearing your boots on a second day, third day in the jungle, they will start to dry your feet out a lot. But you will definitely need to air your feet out in the evenings to dry them out. And you can see the leech socks here. What leeches do is they'll be on the ground or in some bushes or anything like that, and they're going to grab onto you and basically try and make their way inside your boot because they know they're well trained, they're well versed to find some skin. So what leech socks do is they're the material that they can't get through, so it just covers your whole foot and all the way up to just below your knee. So leeches can't get there, and if your trousers aren't going to allow leeches to get through, and neither is your shirt. So if you have that set up, leeches aren't really, the only time they're going to get to you is either on your hands or on your neck or on your face. So and if they are there, you'll probably notice, or someone else will see and tell you. But we'll go on to that shortly and talk a little bit more about that. Jungle equipment. So jungle equipment, when it comes to preparation, is essential to surviving in the jungle and also enjoying it. If you don't have the right equipment, the jungle can be a pretty horrid location to be in. So the first piece of equipment most people kind of resonate and think about when they go to a jungle is your hammock. You never really want to be sleeping on the jungle floor. That's because of things like ants, any opportunity to basically get bitten, you don't want. So a hammock allows you to stay away from that. And when it comes to having a hammock, there's two sections to the hammock you want to have. You don't just want to have your sleeping section. And the sleeping section is your normal section here, but you also want to have a poncho that lays over the top of it. And there should be I would normally have like a minimum of 10 centimeter gap from the poncho to the hammock. That's just because if rainwater sits on it, it won't then dip down and start getting into contact with the hammock and getting it wet. You want to have a little gap there. So the poncho is there for two reasons. It's for rain and water coming down, but it's also for any debris that starts to come down. Any twigs break, any leaves come down, they don't land on the hammock, they're going to go off to the side. And the hammocks to sleep in are incredible. And there is nothing probably, I would say, more peaceful and pretty amazing than sleeping in a hammock at night in the jungle with all the noises, especially when you're group and you know you're safe. It just feels amazing. I would actually give one extra tip when it comes to hammocks as well, which is you can actually have a roll mat with you, or some kind of mat, or even just some layer of clothing to lay and sleep on. Sometimes the hammock material can be very, very thin, so it can actually be a bit uncomfortable to sleep on. And actually, the other reason is, which actually only happens in very well populated areas of jungles, but you can get a very, very, very high number of mosquitoes in some areas. I've been to some areas before where there have been so many mosquitoes because you're near larger towns, but you're on the edge of them in the jungles, or you're near massive water sources and you find lots of mosquitoes. They are so clever, and they will literally come underneath the hammock and try and get through the skin of the hammock to get to your skin. And I've woken up in the night before, had my back bit into shreds from mosquitoes mosquitoes. So that's really, really handy if you find yourself in areas that have got tons of mosquitoes when it comes to staying in your hammock. The hammocks get tied to your trees, and for anyone that comes out of us on our jungle trips, we'll teach you how to do all of this and show you how to set your hammocks up, how to tie them on. When it does come to tying them on, you never, I suppose the main thing you want to know is you literally want to do an overhand knot like you do with your laces. You don't want to have tons of knots in there because it wants to be very easy to undo in an emergency situation, and also just for the next day. I've seen people tie massive knots in and you can never get them undone. The reason being is because you tie them on when the hammock's loose, but when you get in the hammock, you load it and put weight on the knot, which makes it even tighter. So just an overhand knot, because actually what you end up setting up your hammock is using friction around the tree that holds you in place. It's not how tight the knot is. So yes, so you set the hammock up at the height. You can see this gentleman here looks like he's got it set up very, very high, but actually when he gets in the hammock, the weight of it will pull it all down. It'll be quite close to the ground. So this screen's dark, but you'll see that this is a normal camp setup. You've got the hammock in the background and the fire going, but these are some key items I'll definitely consider and that we make sure we have ready for people in the jungle. So first thing is emergency rations. You have two kinds of these kind of meals that some of you might have seen. You get dehydrated ones and you also get wet meals. So I 100% would carry wet meals. The downside to having the wet meals is they're a bit heavier and they actually don't have as many calories in, but then you can eat them cold and you don't need any water, you need nothing. Whereas with dry meals, you need to add water, and you do need the water to be warm, or you need to be in a very warm environment that you can leave it for an hour or two to kind of be absorbed. It's a bit like a pot noodle. So, in terms of them, they're just there for an emergency. If we've run out of our own food, if we lose some food, if we leave food out and some wildlife gets the food, anything like that, it's really good to have some of these as backup. And these are actually really good for you, even if you're going out into the mountains or anywhere in the UK. They're fantastic. Next thing is a water bottle, but having the ability to filter water. So if you're lacking the ability to get a fire going, anything like that, finding water can be a little bit, or clean water can be a bit more difficult. So there's some fantastic products coming out now where like Life Straw. There's one called Water to Go. They're fantastic because you can just fill them up and drink straight from them, and they'll filter the water for you. So they're fantastic to have, and we're going to talk through water later on in a little bit more depth. Backpack, don't overthink backpacks when it comes to jungle. A lot of people start Googling it and think you need to get all these specialist backpacks. They all do the same thing. So yeah, just a normal backpack. If I'm going to be really nosy, I would say actually going with a thinner backpack is better for moving, so you're not going to get stuff caught on it. So not one that's got a really wide position or anything like that. I think having that backpack set up like that is good. Then inside that backpack, dry bags, I see there's a few people on the call that have done trips with us already. Already I've spoken to you about dry bags for your kit in case we encounter rain or you drop your bag in water or anything. It just keeps your clothes dry. And you definitely want to have a dry set of clothes for the night in the jungle, because you'll get out with your damp stuff and put your dry stuff on and sleep in that. And the dry stuff is going to make you very, very happy when you get to camp in the evenings, have some meal and get around the fire. So make sure that stays dry by storing it in one of those canoe bags, dry bags. Compass, we're going to talk about navigation shortly. Compass is really, really essential because it's probably the key thing you need for navigating in the jungle, because some of the other metrics or ways of navigating we're going to go through are actually very difficult and also are quite easy to make mistakes. Knives. I don't expect you to bring out a full jungle machete on your jungle expeditions with us, but we will definitely carry one. They're really, really good for a number of reasons. Obviously, if you need to bushwhack, which is you cutting your way through the jungle, if we need to follow a certain path, they're fantastic. We try to follow either previous tracks that have been used or wildlife tracks, just purely because we think it's much better not to be whacking down more jungle. So that's something to consider. And when it comes to using these, they're also very good for other reasons, i.e. digging holes, chopping wood, setting firewood, sorry. And then also, in real survival situations, they're very, very good at using to make traps. And they're just basically a really functional knife. So the other thing that you can actually bring out on a trip, which can be really handy for yourself, is just like a pocket knife or a multi-tool. They can be really, really helpful because they'll often have a little saw on them or things like that. that you're going to use in the same function, but just smaller. Paracord, I tend to bring out tons of paracord out to the jungle because it often gets used because if things on your hammock break, the paracord is going to be able to fix it and get it all set up, and it's going to be really, really helpful. So paracord, 100%. You know, if you want in actual lengths of paracord, about 15 meters of paracord will be a very small coil, but it is fantastic to have as backup for everything. You can hang lines on it. You can use it to make anything. Head torch for the evenings. We tend not to want to move around in the jungle at night when we're doing an actual expedition, but definitely, you know, if you're into your wildlife, we on our trips out to the jungle, we do nighttime walks looking for wildlife. So I definitely highly recommend a head torch just for moving around camp. And we're going to talk about using a head torch for some rescues later on as well. Then it comes to your survival kit. So this is like what if you order one online, this is what's probably going to come out to you. And I'll talk you through some of the bits on the survival kit. You've got matches on the top right there, the green square. You know, you want to have waterproof matches ideally, as well as matches for fire starting. You're going to have a flint, which is actually inside the box there. A flint is an ability; it creates the ability to make a spark to get a fire going. So flint is really, really essential. So are the matches. This tin needs to stay dry for the matches to work properly. But nowadays you can get waterproof matches, or you can also put Vaseline all over the matches, which will keep them a little bit more waterproof as well. Then I suppose the other little bits, you've got a little knife. This one down on the bottom right here is actually a chainsaw. So like you can actually unravel it and make and cut through wood with it as a last minute thing. You can see you've got a little button compass, a fishing kit, sewing kit. Candle's really, really good for just maintaining a small fire, and ready to start a bigger one. And then also you've got a coil there, which is for making like snares and traps when you're in those scenarios. There's maybe a few bits I would add into this kit. Actually, there's two bits, and not for the reasons I'm about to say. If I know some of you people will be thinking this, but the first thing is a condom. Condom is really, really good for holding water. So if you lose your water bottle and you have no way of holding water and you find a really nice water source, the worst thing in the world is knowing you've got to leave that water source and carry on going with no other water. A condom can hold a huge amount of water like a balloon, basically. So a condom is very good for that. And actually, a tampon is the other thing for fire starting. Fire starting in the jungle can actually be relatively difficult to find dry wood. So a tampon is really, really good way of getting a fire going because it can be opened out, and it's a massive piece of wool, which will burn for quite a long time. And if you want bonus points, if you smother it in Vaseline, it will burn for ages. So it gives you a lot of time to then warm up the next bit of wood, the next kindling to get the actual fire going. So that's a really good kind of tip to add to any kind of survival kit you want to add with you. So going on to like medical kit that you're going to want to have in your equipment, I'm going to kind of fly through this because I understand a lot of people won't be too worried about this stuff, but there's a few key things here, right? So antihistamines are very, very important. I would recommend not having tablet form, but having the cream because usually you're going to require antihistamines when you've been bitten. Antiseptic wipes are like essential to clean out wounds in the jungle. Painkillers, normal painkillers. You don't need anything fancy. Dressings and lots of dressings. We tend to bring when we bring our first aid kit out for jungle expeditions, we will have probably I would say up to 10 times more dressings than we would have normally, because if and we're going to talk about in a minute about this, but if you have wounds in the jungle, you're going to need to keep them clean and keep replacing the dressings. Salts, or electrolytes, as you would say. So you can drink as much water as you want, but you doesn't mean you're going to get more hydrated because you need salts in your blood and in the water that you're drinking, in order for it to be basically processed and go into your muscle. So if you don't have salts, you're going to be dehydrated still, especially when it comes because the food you're going to have is going to, in survival situations, isn't going to be great. So yeah, salts is really, really important. Anti-malarials is obvious. Repellents, you kind of want like a high DEET repellent, like 40-50% DEET if you want to go really fancy, but obviously DEET is not that nice because it can be oily. So yes, there's a few considerations to have there, but DEET can be very, very helpful as another repellent as well as covering up your skin. plasters, sutures to cover up obviously wounds or any larger cuts, and then charcoal. So you can buy like charcoal powder. It's basically it's anti-diarrhea. So if you think in the jungle when you're sweating a lot and then you're having, say you get ill and you have diarrhea in the jungle, it's pretty horrendous because you're going to be extremely dehydrated then. So charcoal powder or diarrhea tablets, what they tend to do is they settle the stomach for you to hopefully and kind of end up clogging you up a little bit. So then you get rid of the diarrhea as quick as possible. In a survival situation, though, you can just use charcoal. So you can use charcoal from a fire and mix it with water and drink that, and it will obviously do have the same effect. So yeah, going to first aid considerations. The main thing to consider in the jungle with first aid is the conditions are hot and humid, so it makes it a lot harder for dealing with wounds. So I'm sorry for the picture. I tried to find the best picture. I thought that was a good one. So example being is on my last trip out to Borneo guiding, we had a client that came out on the trip and had a full-on burn all down their arm from cooking. I think they from oil. It was an oil burn, and didn't tell us until he arrived, and we met him when he arrived at the airport. And we ended up having to. We're actually on the jungle phase in some of the primary jungle. We were replacing his bandages every few hours and re-cleaning the wound because I was so concerned about it getting infected. So wounds in the jungle, you need to basically keep them covered, and you try to minimize getting wounds. So yeah, that is big thing when it comes to first aid in the jungle. Diarrhea, we've just covered with charcoal because you don't want to be dehydrated. So you need to do the preventative steps early with diarrhea. You need to be clean as possible. Those who've been on our trips already see that we kind of put things in place to try and minimize that. Hand washing opportunities, making sure we're prepping the food as well as possible, those things. Then leeches. I said I was going to talk about leeches. I'm going to have a quick sip of tea because I've talked already for 30 minutes, I think. When it comes to leeches, people are scared of leeches. I'm going to tell you now, you don't need to be scared of leeches whatsoever because they don't hurt and they don't do any bad whatsoever. So in fact, people pay for leech therapy. So think of it like that. If you have a leech on you, people pay for this. So leeches have two heads. So the top head there you can see in that picture, that is like the sucker. And by the way, leeches are very, very small. The pictures you see of leeches that make it scary is when they're full of blood. So actually, they're very, very, very small. So small you won't even notice them on you sometimes until they've had a bit of suck of blood. The other side to a leech, people think there's the two heads to it. The other head isn't like a sucking one; it is a grabbing, so it kind of grabs onto the skin, so it doesn't get thrown around all over the place when you're moving. What leeches do is number one, they'll come out when it's raining more, when it's wetter. The wetter it is, the more leeches there'll be. So if you're in the jungle in the wet season, not it's going to be more leeches. In the dry season, you're going to have less. With leeches, what they'll do is they're either usually on the floor, underneath leaves, or on top of leaves, or sometimes if you're walking along well-known tracks or wildlife tracks, they will then hang around on the edge of them on like little bushes or trees or twigs and things. They'll be there ready to grab across. They tend to then just grab onto your boot, and they just move themselves up like the old slinkies, basically. So how they make their way up. They'll find some skin and they'll start going for it. With leeches, like I said, usually you won't even know. So on previous jungle treks, when we've gone in through like massive, last one I led for, which is for another company, was in the wet season, and there were tons of them. And some other people turned up without leech socks, and they were trekking all day. And by the end of the day, they'd take their boot off, and it'd look horrendous. Their sock would be red with blood, but it would just be two little marks, and two leeches got inside their boot and had a good go. Once they've had a good go, they will just release and then just drop off again, and that's them done. If you want to get them off, you hear things about not wanting to pull them off. Definitely agree, because if you pull them off, sometimes the head of the leech can be ripped off if they're really gripping on. So, and then you obviously opening up yourself for infection again. So what I would suggest really with leeches, the first thing is, say you've got one on your arm, you actually roll it with your other hand, and you roll it. And what it does is it rolls itself into a ball, protecting itself, and you just flick it off. So you don't need to do any fancy knife stuff. You don't need any fancy getting the fire out. You literally just roll it. It'll come off, flick it off your skin. The other way you can do is you can grab the head of it, but you just want to slowly rotate and it will come off. What you tend to find then, though, is if you do that, like I tend to go around doing it for people, it will then attach to your hand whilst you're doing that. And then you have to do the whole rolling the ball and flick. So, yeah, that's it. If you're worried about leeches, I'd kind of trying to echo that you don't need to worry about them whatsoever. Disease of the jungles, if you're there for a long time, is a big consideration. So, malaria, yellow fever, dengue fever. Same if you're going out throughout central belt of Africa, the same kind of diseases you have to consider. So, yeah, you've got to do the preventative things to stop that and stop being bitten. So you're covering your clothing up, and also the regions you go to in the jungle. Like you can actually go to areas where there's not going to be a huge amount of mosquitoes. And as a guide, I know Sam, our co-founder's on the call as well. I know both of us, we would definitely choose rather to be away from large mosquito areas. And then often you'll know areas in those countries or jungles where there is dengue fever, yellow fever, or malaria is at a higher rate. Because don't forget, mosquitoes can only travel about a kilometre. So they don't travel very far. They'll be set in areas. So you tend to know there's areas around the world that are high in malaria, low in, and same with yellow fever. Obviously, there is actually even for malaria now, there's a new vaccine coming out. So you can get vaccine for these, but you just want to minimize getting bitten, and you've got your anti-malarials as well to take. And if you do notice any kind of symptoms, then you just need to voice them straight away or make an action plan to obviously get out of the jungle and make those changes. So animals, I suppose, again, this is a big concern for a lot of people going to the jungle. There's a lot of conversations I've had previously with people when they're going on their own expeditions or things going into the jungle. Again, you don't actually need to be very nervous about animals whatsoever. I think there's a few misconceptions. So you obviously got the larger cats in the jungle, like your jaguars, tigers, and leopards. Obviously, you'll know that they're only in certain areas, but the larger or the smaller cats in the jungle, the likelihood of seeing them is extremely rare. And if you do so, it's accidental by both the cat and yourself. You're basically going to just cross each other's path randomly. The best thing you can do if you ever do see in that situation, and I'm saying this knowing that you've pretty much got a 0.00009% of ever seeing one of these in the wild. I'd love to see one in the wild, but I don't think I'm ever going to see them. The best thing you can do is actually make yourself as big as you can and not back away very, very quickly, but just nice and slowly show them you're not a threat and move away. But like I said, they're predators, but they will be scared of you, as are every single animal you're going to find in the jungle will be scared of you. So they will be watching you at all times and trying to stay away from you. So I wouldn't worry about that whatsoever. So the other ones then, obviously, your snakes. So snakes, they hear through vibrations. So that's how they track noise. That's how they track where they're going to go, how they track threats, how they track prey, is all through vibrations. So often when humans are around, they hate it because we talk loads, we make loads of noise, so they stay away. The only time you're going to be in contact with a snake is if you're antagonizing it. So if you go near too close to it, if you try and touch it, those things, that's when snakes are going to get very, very angry. Majority of snakes, 80% of snakes, are not venomous or dangerous in that sense. So I would say, the likelihood of you having any issues with snakes again is extremely small. Again, I've been to the jungle. I think I've only ever seen snakes once. So I wouldn't worry too much whatsoever about snakes. Protocols if you do get bitten. You kind of presume, even if you know when it comes to snake bites what the snake is, you still need to consider that it might be venomous. So if it is, there's a few things you do. You make sure that the heart is higher than when you've got bitten. Traditionally, people get bitten on their arm or their calf or legs. So you can, in a serious situation, you can apply a tourniquet with some pressure, which will, if you think it's venom, it will stop the venom from traveling as much through the body, because you basically don't want that venom to get up to the heart. That's your main goal when it comes to being bitten by a snake. And then obviously then it's very, very fast evacuation protocol, because traditionally with most snakes, especially in jungle regions, and I'm not going to consider Africa here, you've got time basically to get rescued and get out of that situation. There's the black mamba in Africa, which is like extremely aggressive and will go for you whatever opportunity it has, and it's very fast. That's one to consider that you definitely want to stay away from. But in the jungle, no, majority of the time we've got time to get out of there. And then I suppose then you just got the creepy crawlies, which you don't actually get a lot of. You've got jungle ants are the main one to consider. They're going to be they're like fire ants. They bite you, it really itches. So you want to try and have your kit in order in the jungle. So when you're setting up your camp, not leaving your boots on the floor, but putting some sticks down into the ground by your hammock and putting your boots on it upside down to stop ants getting to it. Making sure your hammock's set up properly and not touching the ground. So again, ants can't get to you. And I tend to elevate my bag as well. So I would normally cut two sticks and then have it wedged so it makes a tripod kind of thing, and then set my bag up so it's hanging. So again, nothing gets to it. So yeah, those are considerations there. That's another thing why leech socks are really good, because it will stop ants and bites as well. And I suppose if there's a cool fact for you that if you think about some of the wildlife, especially in Borneo, we see quite a lot of them. There's these millipedes, and they secrete like I'd call it's pretty much cyanide. It's like a cream that comes out of its body, and you can just get a stick and wipe on its back, and it's pretty much raw cyanide. So if you were to lick it, that'd be you gone, and you can smell it, and it smells like almondy. So yeah, that's another cool one to think about. But actually, again, if you have your admin in order in the jungle's very easy to survive in. It's a lot of it's about just considering making sure you're not being lazy in the evenings when you go to bed and things. So fire starting in the jungle. This is a biggie. If you're on your own in the jungle, one of the most important things for morale is getting a fire going. So there's four things we'll talk about. The first thing is the platform in which you're setting up the fire. So you can see we've got like this is actually towards the end of a mangrove swamp, because you can see the roots aren't protruding from the trees now, so you're getting closer to land. With setting a fire, you need a really good base. So if you find yourself in swampy regions, you need to try and get higher up or build a platform to make the fire on. But you need the ground not to be very damp. So if it's damp, you need to elevate it and make the fire on something. Then you need the kindling. We've talked about it from the setup in terms of your survival kits. If you don't have a survival kit with you, then obviously the hardest thing with fire starting is actually getting the fire going right at the very start. So you need to find dry wood, as dry as physically possible, and if it's slightly damp, it won't kickstart. So you need to find really, really dry wood. In terms of finding that, it's dead wood on the ground, and then if you find dead wood, it's basically putting it inside your backpack and letting it dry out as much as possible before you then try and do it. And you want the piece of wood to be very, very thin so they can warm up quickly and get and when they've been sparked and there can be a fire going. So that's what I would suggest. In terms of, there are particular vines and particular plants out in the jungle that on our expeditions we tend to point out and potentially use as well to set fires, that you can use for this as well, like dried out moss. There's certain trees and things that you can cut some of the bark off and use that, and it's very, very good for fire starting the inside of the bark. So that's the first stage. You want it to be able to get the fire going as easy as possible. Then the second stage is, once the fire starts and it's just a small fire, you need really good dry wood that's going to be lit, and it's basically going to start to warm up and start to grow the fire quickly. It's treat making a fire like gears in a car. You've got gear one, which is just a small bits of kindling. Gear two is a little bit bigger. Gear three is a little bit bigger, but it's all got to be dry wood until you're onto the bigger logs that are still dry wood, but you're putting them through the fire. Once that fire has grown and got big and it's very, very hot, then that's when you can start to add actual live wood. So you can start to cut off, some of this stuff you can see in the picture there. You can start to cut that off and put it over the top. It will create some smoke, but you can then also lie some of the logs that you found that are too damp, lie them right by the fire, dry them out ready for the next day. So that's the basics of fire starting. But getting the fire going at the very start is the most difficult, because you need to create a spark, you need to have something. So when it comes to that, if you don't have your survival kit with you, then most people are like, well, I'm never going to create a fire. But there is a way of creating fire without any kit whatsoever, which is through friction. So you obviously this is a bow. This is using the bow drill, which is you can make a bow, and you then obviously spin some hardwood up against the dry wood, and you do have to put some decent force into it. So the this picture here, the guy's pushing down really hard on the hardwood to create lots of friction against that dead wood at the bottom, and then you can see then he's very violently spinning it back and forth. You can do this with your hands, but it takes a lot longer. Doing the bow drill, you can do it very quickly, as in like once you've got it set up properly, you can get a fire going in less than a minute. And what will happen then is you'll see the dry wood, you'll see smoke starting to come out of the dry wood, and then you're like, okay, here we go. Fight through that a bit longer, and then you need to have your kindling ready to go to basically put the ash that's been created from the dry wood. You put that into the kindling, it will spark the fire, and then you just slowly blow into it, and it will start the fire going. It is a real skill. So those of you that ever think you want to try and learn this, go and practice it first, because you don't want to be doing it for the first time in a survival situation. I guarantee you that. So water. Water collection in the jungle is usually relatively easy, but it's also very easy to get the wrong kind of water and get poorly. So rainwater is obviously the best option. You can collect rainwater in multiple different ways. You've got that poncho that you got with your hammock. You can use that to collect the rainwater and run it off into some form of cylinder or bamboo or anything to collect and store it. Rainwater is probably, when you're in the jungle, the best option, and you will often incur rain. Even in the dry season, you're going to be hit with rain in the jungle. It's just not as much. It's not going to be 24/7, basically. Rivers are really good, obviously, sources of water, but the big thing to consider here is the sediment in the river and the runoffs and things like that. They're going to make the water very dirty. So you either need to be able to filter it, or you need to collect it, try and filter it through a sock or anything like that, and then also boil it. And if you're going to boil it, you need to be boiling it probably for more than about 10 minutes to be able to kill everything off in it. So that's a consideration if you're going to collect river water. Bamboo water is very good. So you got the bamboo here. All you need to do is cut like a little V into the bamboo, and water will start to drip out. And actually, if it's full, it will like flow out like a hose. The main thing with the bamboo water is not to drink too much of it. Try and find other ways of water as well, because historically people can get quite poorly if they drink too much bamboo water. So yeah, and also bamboo, you can do is cut it out, clear out the inside, and it's very good for storing water as well. And then vines is finally, so vines, you want to try and cut them as high as possible, and then water tends to drip out of them. You can collect that water as well. And I would often, with that water, try and boil it again as well, just because you've got to be a little bit careful with what kind of vines you cut and things and where the water's come from. So boiling it just makes it a little bit safer. Then it comes to food. I'm not going to go through lots of foods because I also understand I've been yabbering on for a while already. But yeah, when it comes to food in the jungle, there's a really simple test you can do. So if you find something in the jungle, traditionally it's going to be like you're going to find some fruit. You're going to find maybe some nuts. So you're going to find what might resonate and look like a vegetable, something like that. So the best thing you can do is either cut it open, and we take through stages of testing it. The first stage is to rub it on some sensitive skin, so like the inside of your wrist, and leave it and see if your skin reacts to it. If it doesn't react to it, the next stage then is to put it inside your gum, so between your lip and your gum, and just keep it there for a few minutes. See if the taste is horrendous. That will be an indication it's not good for you. If the taste is really bad, or if it's like super bitter, and then if that's okay, the next stage is to eat a very small amount of it and then wait just a little while. And if you have no immediate reaction over a few hours, you can eat more of it and then wait 24 hours, and then you know you're good to go. And then you can start to eat it. In terms of just quick items you can think of, there is opportunity for lots of fruit in the jungle, but definitely test it out before you go through those stages before you actually start eating it. But bamboo also is very good, but you do need to boil it for a long time to make it edible, because it doesn't taste. You can't eat it basically. But if you boil it for a long time, eventually, and I'm talking leave it in water for a long time, and sometimes you have to replace the water and then put fresh water and continue boiling it. You will be able to eat that as well. Navigation in jungle. So when we go into the jungle, we have like a medivac plans, we call it. So obviously myself and Sam are both ex-military. So we use a lot of old military terms in for these expeditions because they work really well because it's the exact same thing. So medivac means the opportunity to get anyone out in a medical situation. So whether we are on, say, on a jungle trek, we are going to have at certain points that jungle trek, the opportunities or bearings that we can follow to get to the nearest roads or nearest rescue points, open canopy and things like that. So definitely, if you find yourself going to the jungle and you're planning your own thing, I would 100% recommend knowing the locations you are going to be walking along and marking either on a GPS or on your map, knowing where you can then divert off. That's the first stage. But when it does come to map reading the jungle, it can actually be incredibly difficult. It's much, much more difficult than just navigating in the open in fields or on mountains because there's a lot less features for you to be able to see. And traditionally, you can only see, I would say in dense jungle, you can tend to only see about 20 meters in front of you as a max. So the ability to map read using contours is essential. Those of you that are really into map reading or want to learn more about it, then feel free to give us a shout and we can, we're starting to do some more things, some more one-day trips and things that we want to do in the future, including navigating. So if you want to learn some of those things, give us a shout. But when you look at a map and look at contour lines, it can be quite confusing. But in the jungle, there is contours all over the place. So if you can read contour lines, it can be extremely, extremely helpful because then you don't need to rely on any of the features and just the contours. And that's how you map read in the jungle. If you use, you've got two different sizes of maps usually. It's a 1 to 25,000 and 1 to 50,000. 1 to 50,000 is much better for reading contours. It's basically just a more zoomed out version. It's much easier to map read and it saves you having to carry as much map as well in the jungle. And it's just easier for you to move through the ground without having to keep checking all the time. So there's a few methods we can use to navigate in survival situations. First one's the stick method. You whack a stick into the ground and you're going to need some sunlight for this. You need to find an opening in the canopy to use this, but you whack the stick in the ground. Doesn't need to be a high stick, it can be very, very small. And then the shadow it creates, you mark the end of the shadow and then you wait. Usually you wait 15 to 20 minutes and then you whack in where this next shadow is created and you draw a line between the two and that's your west to east line. So straight away then you've already been set up there knowing where west to east is and you can set up your north to south. So stick method is very, very simple. You can use your watch for finding north and south, and if you want to know that, drop me a message afterwards. I'll send you like a video of it. But the problem with doing it is you need to know if you're in the northern or southern hemisphere. So in a jungle it can be quite it can be really confusing because you might not quite get it right because the technique changes if you're in the northern or southern hemisphere. Tree growth. So in the northern hemisphere, moss tends to grow on the southern side of trees, and then vice versa in the southern hemisphere. So again, if you're on the edges of the tropic belt in jungles, they're quite good to use that, and it can be quite apparent when you look at those things. But I definitely, this is worst case scenario. You're going to be using that method. Rivers is like the best thing in the world. If you find a river, you follow the flow of the river because you know where it's going. Eventually, it's going to be going out to sea and definitely to more populated areas. So in survival situation, if you find a river, try and follow it. Following a river can be difficult in the jungle just because of the terrain and obviously the edges of rivers can be very muddy and very wet. So you might just have to keep 50 meters away from the jungle, but try and follow its line. And you obviously get lots of horseshoes as well, sorry, like this as well. And then often what will happen is over time, the river where the horseshoe is thinnest, the water eventually cuts through and just creates an actual lake in the middle of the jungle, which you'll often see out in the jungle, which can then also create more confusion. But that would be super stagnant water. Wind is really important to know. So if you're taking it seriously, you're like, right, I'm going to Borneo on my own expedition trekking. If you know the wind patterns in Borneo, then you'll know which direction you're going in. So as an example, in the dry season in Borneo, the wind tends to be northeasterly, whereas it's the opposite in the wet season. So traditionally, if you can start to see wind patterns, you know what direction you're going in. So wind can be really good. It's a very easy thing to research to find out before you go. And then finally, stars. So night navigation in the jungle, if you've got open canopy, is very, very helpful. So I'm going to talk through that now. So the North Star is in for the Northern Hemisphere, but When you're on the equator, you get best of both worlds because on the equator you tend to see all the different kind of stars, but you just don't see them as often. So in the northern hemisphere, you tend to see the North Star, let's say usually from about 10 p.m. onwards, and you'll see it until about 4 a.m. Whereas in the jungle, you're going to see it in the middle, you're going to see it in the later hours between like 1 and 2, 1 and 3. So the opportunity to find those stars is a little bit harder, and obviously you don't forget in the canopy it's going to be a little bit harder to see the stars. But it's really, really good to use stars for navigation because they're very, very consistent and easy to follow. So this is the plough in the northern hemisphere. This, ignore the top one. It's very hard to see the top one, but look at the bottom one. You tend to see it all the time. So what you're looking for, it looks like a saucepan, and you look at the end of the saucepan and you've got those two stars at the end and you can see the line going off it. The best thing to do, and you can even try this later on this evening, I think it's clear at the minute if you're in the UK, you can take the distance from those two stars and go 4.5 up. 4.5 up, and you will then reach the North Star, and the North Star will be extremely clear. It will be much, much brighter than all the others and look bigger. So that is dead north. So you can follow that North Star. So in the jungle, you can try and pin it and follow it as best as you can. If you can't follow it, the best thing you can do then is try and this is very hard and very slow going, but you find it, you follow a line down and you pick something out in the distance, like a tree, you can see it's on the same line. And then you look where you are and you try and remember that tree, and you walk from that tree to this, you've walked from the tree to tree, you turn around and see the line you've done, and then try and follow another line through it if you can't see the stars because of the canopy. So as you can see, now you're kind of probably getting an understanding of why in the jungle, the survival is extremely difficult and movement in the jungle is very difficult. Then this one is a Southern Cross. This is the best photo I could find of it as an example. So with a Southern Cross, you will see a actual cross, which is the top version of it. And then underneath you'll see two very bright stars, or sometimes above as well. Don't forget, it won't always, because of the rotation of the Earth, it won't always be exactly how this looks now. Same with the plough that you just saw a minute ago. So what you do is with the Southern Cross, you take the top and bottom of the cross and draw a line like you've just seen there. And then you use the 2 pointers and you perpendicularly draw a line through it and follow the line until both lines cross each other. And where they cross each other, that's going to be, I think I can draw here actually. I'm going to try it now quickly. Yeah, where they cross each other here, that is south. So that's again just another thing to think about when it comes to coming to finding your south point, which will be just in that area there. So again, you're gonna have to use the same method. The Southern Cross will pop up at night and when you're at the equator, just for a very small amount of time anyway. So next up, now I don't know how to do my spread. There we go, perfect. So movement in the jungle, and we're nearly there, by the way, guys. Movement in the jungle. There's a few key considerations when it comes to moving through the jungle, if you can do. Ridge lines, try and stick to ridge lines. What you don't want to be doing is going up and down, up and down, up and down through the jungle. It's so tiring. It's going to be swampy and wet. It's going to be really, really difficult. So ridge lines, try and stay on the same height if you can do, because it's going to be a lot less effort. Try and stay away from moving down into valleys, whether it be small little re-entrants or valleys or whatever, because when you do go into them, that's where all the challenges are in the jungle. You have tons of water, you can have swamps, it's going to be muddy, it's going to be damp, there's going to be a lot of mosquitoes, there's going to be other wildlife. So stay out of valleys, basically. If you can stay higher, the easier it's going to be for you to survive. Bushwhacking. Now, bushwhacking sometimes is essential to get through an area, but also it's very, very tiring. So if you can avoid it, definitely avoid it. Even if it means you're going off track of your bearing, your compass or whatever, you 100% want to try and avoid that. Swamps are horrendous to move through, and you're going to get very muddy, very dirty, and very tired and very sweaty, which means all the things you don't want to be in a jungle. So if you find yourself near swamps, stay away from it at all costs. Completely stay away from it. Daytime travel, I think just from you hear that from the moving at night and navigation, try and move in the daytime. It's going to be warmer as well, so a big issue that people have in these climates, and actually in a lot of adventurous climates, is they get sweaty in the day, and then when the sun disappears, they get very cold at night. So the night time needs to be for your own survival, to rest and recover, sleep, and ready for the next day of movement. And obviously it's going to be very, very difficult for people to find you moving at night anyway if they're out searching for you, which we're going to talk about in a second. River crossings River crossings are pretty much essential to know in the jungle because you're going to encounter lots of different rivers usually, especially in a survival situation. Traditionally, rivers in the jungle usually are actually all right to cross, but with worst case scenario, they can be very fast flowing, and crossing them can be very, very dangerous, especially on your own. When we plan expeditions, the first thing we actually have to consider is, well, two things. The two main injuries or deaths that you see on expeditions, the first one's during travel, so during vehicle travel is 80%. And then the rest of the 20, the higher percentage of that 20 is through water, through drowning and things, and through river crossings. So whenever we plan expeditions, they have some of our main considerations with what vehicles we're using, and also whether we're going to have to do real river crossings for emergencies. So river crossings, this diagram gives you a really clear example of what you kind of expect here. So on the outside of the river bends is going to be deepest. So you want to try and avoid river bends because you try and usually find the flow of the water speeds up. If you find a river is wide and then gets narrower, it's going to be a lot faster. So it's going to be more hard to move through it. In the jungle, there's going to be a lot of debris in rivers, and you often don't know how deep they are because they're going to have hidden depths. So you definitely need to consider that in terms of trying to find an area that looks like it's very clear. If you find ripples in the water like this, you know there's going to be debris underneath it, usually rocks and things. And yeah, any deeper sections, and obviously in jungles, because of the changes in height in the jungle is pretty rapid, you do get a lot of waterfalls, which is why river crossings are extremely dangerous. So what you need to try and find is an area where the water might be slower, which is actually usually after obstacles like this. And try and move on slightly wider, not fast flowing parts of the river. If you do need to move through fast flowing bits of river, then I recommend usually using some vine and tying it around one tree and not tying it around your waist. It's a mistake, and so it used to get taught, but obviously if you tie it around your waist and then get trapped underneath a rock or something, you ain't going anywhere. So, or it gets tangled or anything like that. So literally have it to hold on to as a marker, or you can use a big stick as like a walking pole going through the river. If there's multiple of you, river crossings are a lot easier because then you can have either rope or vine and feed it out as the person goes across, and do it as a team of 2 or 3. So that can be really, really helpful. Then, and finally, jungle rescue. So a few ways to be rescued in the jungle if you find yourself stuck there. Number one, smoke. You've heard already about how to kind of create smoke. You need a big fire, so you need to have a fire going ready to see rescue. So when people are lost in the jungle, the first thing they do is they set up flight patterns over the top of the jungle to track and look for you. So if you see flights coming over, usually small planes, then smoke's amazing to use that. So you need a big fire ready to go, and then start whacking some greenery on top of it, and it will create a lot of smoke. Bright colors are essential. So trying to set up bright colors in open areas of the canopy to know in what area you're in is really important. Very good to have. Rivers are obviously open spaces, so you can try and set something up on rivers, whether that be writing SOS on the side of a riverbank, or it might be trying to tie some bright colors on the edge of rivers. Very, very good for that, for visualization for them. Using mirrors for reflection or reflection of the sun. Very difficult skill to actually get right. So, if you're using that, you're clutching at straws there for a little bit of last minute survival. And then finally, light. So at night, but the problem is traditionally they won't be spanning over the top of the jungles at night, but using light and fires and things is very important. And then obviously noise like whistles and things. So that's a pretty much 1 hour rock through everything in the jungle. I'm going to try and come off this. I'm going to stop sharing a second and see if I can. Let me do this. Perfect. I will try and stop sharing now. Go back to video. Just see. I don't. If there's any Q&As or any questions, I'll just come into the chat. Yeah, so if you've got any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. I suppose obviously the final thing I was going to just talk to you about, if you wanted to stay and talk about, was our brand new expedition that we are doing out in Borneo. I'll talk through very quickly about the idea behind it. So when we set Legend up, we wanted to have a very small amount of expeditions. We don't want to have hundreds like you often see on travel companies. We want to be experts in a small amount of expeditions that we really, really specialize in and do well. And with Borneo, obviously I've worked there before, and I think it's such a fantastic location to go for jungle experiences. We wanted to be able to offer a mountain, desert, jungle, sea, this all our kind of big dream as we evolve this business. But the jungle was the next one from our experience and teams of working out there. When you go to Borneo, you do tend to go to just one side of Borneo. Borneo is split into three different countries. We tend to use the Malaysian side. Politically, it's very stable and it's very safe, and it's obviously fantastic for wildlife. You can either go into the west side of Borneo, see the mountain and see the city, Kota Kinabalu, or people then tend to also fly into the other side of the island and see the wildlife. We wanted everyone to kind of have the opportunity to see it all because we understand that the likelihood of you going to Borneo again is quite small. So with this trip, you actually fly into one side of the island and through boats pretty much and some trekking, we take you through the whole island. There is a drive portion in the middle that we cover as well to cover the distance. Our goals on a lot of these trips is to minimize travel time and maximize your time on the ground, seeing the place. So this is where this plan's come into fruition really of Borneo. So you go into Sandakan up on the east side of Borneo, and we take you to a place called Sepilok, which the reason being is to see orangutans. Orangutans are only in Borneo, but seeing orangutans in the wild is very, very challenging because they move home every day. They set a nest up in the tree and they move home every kilometre. So the opportunity to see them can be very, very difficult. I've seen them in the wild once and it was amazing. So we are purposely going to places on this trip to try and find them in the wild. But Sepilok has a rehab centre. It's an open zoo, so it's not fenced at all. But they help teach orangutans how to feed and hunt again. So often what you find is we can go there and we know we're probably going to see some orangutans. It's kind of like guaranteeing the tick of you being there and seeing them. It's also a chance for you to relax after travelling for a day. And also there is a sun bear centre there, which is where the smallest bear in the world is. So you get to go and see that. And there's a rainforest discovery centre, which is like your first step into the jungle, where we'll take you for a walk in the rainforest discovery centre. And it's a rainforest. It's not like when you say centre, it sounds like a building. It's a proper rainforest. It's got one of the tallest trees in the world there that we can go trekking through the jungle to go and find. It's very, very cool. Good chance to kind of just get the feel for being in the jungle. The next day, we actually jump into a boat and then travel down to the place called the Kinabatangan River. It's the famous place where you go to see all the monkeys, proboscis monkeys, macaques, loads of different kind of monkeys. You can go and see there. Obviously, orangutans. You can have often pygmy elephants, small Asian elephants that have adapted to live in the jungle out on the riverbeds, crocs, everything you can imagine. That's the wildlife place to go. We spend 3 days on the river, staying in a nice lodge. Again, breaking you into being in the jungle. We go on jungle treks, river cruises, night treks, and we also spend an afternoon doing some jungle training. Very much some of the things we've been through today, but in real life situations. And then after which we then jump in vehicles and drive down to close to the foot of the biggest mountain in Southeast Asia, which is Mount Kinabalu. So Mount Kinabalu is just tipping over 4,000 meters high. And we do our challenge. And our challenge is to jungle trek in and around the foot of the mountain for 3 days, where we're going to set up hammocks, get fires going, live in the jungle, experience it properly, as you should do if you're going to go there. And whilst we're doing that, we do a teeny bit of acclimatization because we actually climb the second highest mountain, which is not very high. It's just 2,500 meters, but we actually sleep up near the summit, which is still in dense canopy. So it's very, very cool. We're using bamboo in some open areas to set up your hammocks and we've got all our team with us. We'll have chefs, we'll have some local team with us as well to support. So very much of those of you that are on the call that have climbed Kilimanjaro, it's a very similar situation, but just a smaller team. And then we spend those 3 days. On the third day we wake up and go to the foot of the mountain and go and climb the mountain over 2 and a bit days. So we sleep up in a hut, which will give you a chance to get out the hammock and get into a bed. And then we go up for the summit. And the summit is a really, really cool climb. I like Kinabalu because it's not a crazy climb, but it's very, very beautiful. It's a big old slab of granite. It just sticks out the jungle and it's stunning. I'm pretty certain you're going to see 100% summit success. So it's another good challenge for you and another good legend to tick off and say you've done. After all the jungle trekking, the safaris, the mountain climbing, it's kind of then chance to relax, and we'll pick you up from the bottom of the mountain and we head to Kota Kinabalu and stay in a luxury hotel right on the coastline. With that, the mountain, we can go to Kinabalu. It's a big old city. It's a proper Asian city, so it's very, very cool if those you want to see it. Night markets, all that kind of stuff, and then you've got the islands off the coast there, which are just stunning. And what we'll do the next day is we'll jump into our own boat and we'll head off to the island snorkeling for the whole day. So getting out in the sun, snorkeling, we'll find some beaches to relax on, and it's kind of just a chance to celebrate really and just enjoy the final bits and kind of see the last bit you kind of need to see in Borneo. There's some really, really good fish that you can go and snorkel and see. And then yeah, finishing off with that, then back to the hotel, and we would drop you off back at the airport to finish off with. I suppose with our trips, very much like our other ones that we offer, there isn't any kind of hidden things in there. So what you see is what you get. There's no like pay extra for have your own room, anything like that. That's all done. Think considerations with food, all that kind of stuff. That's how we run these expeditions, and that's how we've designed the same. We've designed this Borneo expedition. Our first one we're doing is as 12th of April to the 22nd of April this year, and then we're also doing two more next year, one in April and one in June. In terms of times to climb, April's very good because it's the start of the dry season, so it's not too touristy yet. So a lot of the places aren't really hectic, whereas June is definitely guaranteed very, very good weather, but also you're guaranteed it's going to be a bit busier. So there's kind of way ups there of those two times that we're planning to go out there. But this year's one is going to be in April. We're doing it because it's our first trip, like we do with lots of our first trips. They're small groups, so we're only going to allow a maximum 6. But if we only have one person or 2 people or 3 people book on, we're still delivering the trip. So yes, I suppose that is all of the information. If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat now, whether it be about Borneo or about jungle trip, anything like that. Feel free to pop it in. If not, thank you ever so much for spending your Thursday evening with us for the hour. I really appreciate you jumping on. This is our first one we've done like this, and we're going to look to do more of these because we really enjoy. One of our kind of ethos is behind the background is education, and we want to educate as many people as possible about these places around the world. So yes, thank you very much for jumping on. If you don't have any other questions or anything like that, have a lovely evening, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thanks, Dennis. Stuart, his chuckles going. I don't know. Maybe. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I don't know if Charlie's going to be going on this trip. I'm not sure if I don't know if you sold it to him yet. I've not spoken to him, so maybe I should send him the information. But yeah, the good thing, Stu, is if you do come on this, mate, that you won't be able to share a hammock with him if that helps. Max, thank you for jumping on. Henry as well. Henry, thanks, mate. I hope you've recovered from last week, mate. Appreciate you jumping on. Rob Clack as well. Good to see you, mate. Thanks for jumping on. Dennis, in terms of age limits, no. I suppose a lot of it's all to do with whether you're comfortable moving on the jungle floor. So, oh hey Sherry as well. Thanks for jumping on. Good to see you earlier, mate. Yeah, if you're happy, I suppose when it comes to age limits, there's no pace concerns or anything like that. And actually, the main thing is actually whether you're comfortable moving over some of the loose ground and things like that. The pace that we're going to walk at is going to be very controlled, especially when we go onto the altitude section of the mountain. So, but Dennis, if you want to chat one on one, feel free to. I've got your email, so I'll drop you an email afterwards. But feel free, we can just jump on a video call together and discuss it in a little bit more depth. But no, for a lot of our trips, we don't put age limits on it. It's more so whether you're happy and think you're physically comfortable to go and do the trips. In terms of also then and age limits for under 18s, it's usually dependent on whether they've got a guardian with them as well. So if you're under 18, it's guardian with you, and then we're good to go. Thanks, Rob. Cheers, guys. Thanks, Digger, as well for jumping on, mate. Good to see you. Amazing. Right. Well, I will be ending the chat, and yeah, thank you very much again for jumping on. If you want to know any more information or anything, just give us a shout. Oh, in terms of cost for the trips, I didn't bring up. So the cost for this time round, because it's our what we call our recce trip, our reconnaissance trip, our first one we deliver, it's 4,850. And then next year the price will be more because when we run our reconnaissance trips, we're not looking to make any form of profit. Yeah, it is purely It is purely for us to get people on it, grab some content ready for the following years. So the following trip will be a little bit more expensive. But yeah, amazing. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys. Thanks, Dennis. And we'll see you guys soon. Cheers.